We are just in LAX, about to go to
Bahamas.
And it's Fyre Festival, so I'm going to take you guys along with me, ready to go on an adventure.
On April 27, 2017, thousands of ticket holders and social media influencers are flocking to the Fyre Festival, a star-studded music fest.
This is why we're in the Bahamas. We've come for this Fyre Festival. It's like history in the making.
26-year-old video producer Amanda Brooks is lured by the promise of paradise in this promotional video. A villa, gourmet food, an all-star lineup, even a treasure hunt.
There were millions of dollars of prizes, and you could rent the jet skis and go and find the clues, and it sounded like a really fun experience.
But the reality on the ground is more like a scene from the Hunger Games.
The first thing we see is people running for tents and fighting over tents. People spent $10,000 to go to this thing. How could they not have anything set up? Like, this is not what I signed up for.
In the concert industry, there has never been anything that remotely rivals the disaster that the Fyre Festival became.
But this fiasco isn't the first for festival organizer Billy McFarland.
Should I set up Shredder?
Just remember to smile.
Rolling. Magnesis is the concierge platform that connects millennials with new people, products, and services.
In 2015, 23-year-old Billy McFarland is the founder and CEO of a buzzworthy company called Magnesis.
And Billy had an idea. What if you could create your own black card?
McFarland and his friends think the American Express Black Card is the ultimate status symbol, but they don't make enough money to qualify. So McFarland finds a vendor in China and decides to create his own.
And Billy knew that would appeal to his young friends. Yeah, I'll just put this on my black card.
But the Magnesis Black Card isn't a real credit card. McFarland's company simply takes the magnetic strip from a user's ordinary credit card and duplicates it.
Cardholders actually link up their real debit and credit card and use your Magnesis card every day for regular purchases.
He was kind of the, in my mind, sort of the champion for the fake it till you make it kind of crowd.
For $250 a year, members get a 24/7 concierge service and access to exclusive parties and events.
He rented a townhouse, a nice townhouse, and Magnesis cardholders were able to use this to hang out in, at an open bar. You know, rappers come in. There's some NBA and NFL players that started using it. And within months, Billy starts attracting press attention.
McFarland raises $3 million and counts billionaire oil and gas titan Aubrey McClendon among his early investors.
That was the biggest calling card he could possibly bring out. I've got money from Aubrey McClendon. Are you in?
McFarland's staff grows to 20. He travels by private plane, drives a Maserati, and cements his reputation as one of the city's hottest young entrepreneurs.
Just had a great Magnesis Plus launch party in DC.
He had a real sense of, I'm a young man going places. And if you didn't know it, I'll tell you.
So we're 20 months in, and we just eclipsed 10,000 members across New York City and Washington, D.C.
But former employees say that McFarland is grossly inflating membership numbers to make Magnesis appear more successful. And the business is actually struggling for cash.
Problems with Magnesis really grew as it attempted to grow. They're making promises, to members. We'll get your private jet, we'll get you tickets to Hamilton.
McFarland sells tickets to hit Broadway shows and to A-list concerts like Beyoncé, Adele, and Kanye West. But McFarland doesn't actually have access. He's just taking the cash and buying scalp seats at premium prices. Some members receive their tickets, but many do not. And headlines show the complaints are pouring in.
They started losing a lot of the original members. And so it really became a company of failed promises, big dreams and little follow-through.
By May 2016, McFarland appears bored with Magnesis and is looking for his next move. He starts a new company called Fyre Media and touts an app that gives users a simple way to book celebrities for events.
So what he was trying to do is create almost a Tinder for artists where you would make an offer and book these shows directly, sort of take out that middleman.
And McFarland's new business partner is rapper Ja Rule.
Well, I'm gonna let my partner in crime here, Billy McFarland, give y'all an introduction of what Fyre is and what it's bringing to the table.
How's it going, guys? So, 3 years ago, I
Ja
started...
Rule, let's just say, was no longer at the peak of his career. I mean, to Ja Rule, Billy looked like the real deal.
I've loved Ja Rule since I was a kid, and I really wanted to book talent for these small private concerts.
But then seriously, if you're worth $50 million and you can hire Beyonce, you're gonna do that for an app?
Despite the challenges, McFarland does what he does best.
Giant Magnesis painting for the wall right there.
Oh, great.
You know, Billy had a lot of obvious talents, but the greatest one was selling himself.
How's it going, man?
And investors line up.
Billy would take money from anybody who was looking for the next big thing. There's a lot of people like that in Manhattan.
Marketing executive Carola Jane sees promise in the young McFarland. Jane is married to a high-profile hedge fund manager and is a savvy investor herself. She reportedly puts together a $4 million loan to help grow Fyre Media, and McFarland is off and running. He sets up headquarters in a swanky new office space in Tribeca. With a team of engineers and designers building the app, McFarland is looking for ways to promote it.
Seat back and tray table must be in the upright and locked position.
And he finds inspiration while on vacation in the Bahamas and pitches a wild idea to his bartender.
And he's like, Delroy, let me ask you a question. What do you think about us having a music festival here?
In 2016, Billy McFarland is island hopping in the Bahamas when McFarland says his private plane runs dangerously low on fuel. The pilot makes a pit stop on Norman's Cay. In the 1970s, the Cay served as a cocaine smuggling hub for Carlos Lader, an associate of Pablo Escobar. Today, Norman's Cay has just a single airstrip to serve a few dozen residents. Despite these obvious limitations, McFarland sees this tiny island as the perfect spot to stage a huge music festival as a way to promote his new celebrity booking app.
I'm like, Billy, a music festival on Norman's Cay? You'll have to spend like a lot of cash just to get that to work.
Delroy Jackson is a bartender on the island.
Billy is like, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, what the f ever, dude? Exactly 2 weeks. And I saw Billy exiting the plane, right? He said, Delroy, I told you I'd be back.
McFarland is back with his Fyre Media team in tow, including partner Ja Rule. McFarland doesn't have any experience planning a music festival, but he does have a vision of the ultimate fantasy experience.
He knew instinctively that if you want to make this app hot, then you must create some advertising or a message that is hot and sizzling.
And nothing sizzles more than bikini-clad supermodels. McFarland shells out more than $1.5 million to hire the biggest names in the business: Bella Hadid, Emily Ratajkowski, and Alessandra Ambrosio.
I'm like, whoa. Woo! Damn. Billy, what's up? He said, hey, those are Victoria's Secret models. See, you know we're gonna have a music festival, right? But before we have the festival, you have to do like a promotional video.
The money seemed to flow pretty freely. We spent close to $40,000 on the yacht. He wanted me to photograph him on a jet ski. And then he says, like, today we're gonna go film me swimming with the sharks. It's like, were we there for a marketing video or were we there to like hang out and just have fun.
The sun comes up on an undisclosed location not far from the U.S.-Mexico border. For the locals, it's just another day in paradise. But for one family that crossed the Sinaloa drug cartel, it's another day in hiding.
Over the lifespan of their drug empire, our husbands moved 100 tons of cocaine.
Meet Olivia and Mia Flores. They've been in hiding ever since their husbands, Peter and Jay Flores, decided to exit the drug trade and cooperate with the U.S. investigation of Joaquin Guzmán Loera, a.k.a. El Chapo.
Chapo was a very serious man. However, with our husbands, he treated them like his sons.
To this day, the Flores family remains in danger, their lives subject to retribution from freelance killers still loyal to Chapo. But Olivia and Mia have agreed to step out of the shadows for the first time to sit down for an exclusive interview with American Greed and open up about their time as cartel wives, married to Peter and Jay, and for better or worse, to the Sinaloa cartel.
Our husbands were a huge asset to Chapo Guzman.
They were American, they spoke English, and then they spoke Spanish.
Our husbands were able to maneuver in both the streets of Chicago all the way up to the mountaintops of Sinaloa, and they were able to navigate both worlds.
Navigating both worlds is also something that comes naturally to Olivia and Mia. Long before they were cartel wives, they were daughters to two of Chicago's finest.
I come from a family of law enforcement. My father's a police officer.
I also come from a family of law enforcement. My dad, all my uncles, cousins, they're all on the Chicago police force.
It's an odd quirk of this storied city that honest cops and criminals often live side by side in Chicago's working-class neighborhoods. And like the Capulets and Montagues, their children sometimes fall in love.
When you think about somebody in that drug world, you have this vision of somebody being very aggressive, very powerful, very vicious.
They were just really, really different.
Peter and Jay were very polite,
very soft-spoken.
And they just carry themselves so much different that I didn't understand what they were doing in the drug trade.
Peter and Jay's life in the drug trade begins in Chicago's Mexican-American neighborhood called La Villita, or Little Village. That's where they were born in 1981. And even in the cradle, the twins had a head start on the game.
The twins, for lack of a better way to describe it, were born into the drug trade.
The twins' father was a known narco trafficker.
By day, the twins' father, Margarito Flores, drives a forklift at a local candy factory. But his side hustle is moving loads of narcotics up from Mexico.
When the twins were little, they basically served as human cover loads, where their father would bring them back and forth across the border, their car seats, or they would sit physically on top of bales of marijuana that were hidden in the car to reduce suspicion as the car was going back and forth across the border.
When they were children, they were the lookouts for their dad. So they knew about the drug business even before, they went to high school.
In the mid-1990s, the twins' father moves back to Mexico, while Peter and Jay stay put in Chicago. Using their father's cartel contacts, the twins begin buying pure, uncut cocaine from Mexican suppliers like El Chapo. But unlike their old man, the Flores twins are innovators when it comes to distribution. And their new ideas pay off in a big way.
Before the twins, the cartels would use, like, the Latin kings. And the way that they operated, it was territorial. You owned a territory, and you guarded your territory with guns and blood. But when the twins came along, they broke all the norms. They tapped all the gangs. They made alliances with everybody.
Unlike previous generations, the twins begin to break down dividing lines in one of America's most segregated cities. doing wholesale business with an emerging market of like-minded buyers.
When it comes to money, they see no color. It was just green.
So the twins worked with African Americans. They worked with Puerto Rican gangs as opposed to just Mexican gangs. So they expanded because the twins were not about territory. They were about money. In the end, everybody understood the language of money. They weren't even adults before they were millionaires.
As the twins' customer base grows, so does their need for cocaine. They are now buying upwards of 10,000 kilos a month. And 2,000 miles away, their chief supplier is starting to take notice. From his perch atop the Sinaloa cartel, Joaquin Guzmán Loera is almost a mythical figure in the drug trade.
He was a logistics genius.
Jack Riley spent years hunting El Chapo as a senior official at the DEA.
His ability to move goods across the border and deliver them in the internal part of the United States was unmatched.
El Chapo first pops up on the radar in 1993 with the discovery of his drug tunnels running underneath the U.S.-Mexico border.
The fact of the matter is this border that you see here this morning is under siege by drug traffickers. And at this point, significant ties to the Joaquin Guzmán organization have been established.
He comes up with these crazy ideas that end up working for him.
Chapo's game-changing innovations run the gamut, from fully engineered tunnels underneath the border to homemade submarines that ferry drugs through the Pacific.
It's insane. It's something never seen before.
And he's seen as untouchable, thanks in part to his daring escape from a Mexico prison in 2001.
So what he did was he bribed somebody in the laundry unit to smuggle him out in a laundry cart.
By 2004, he's thought to traffic nearly $3 billion worth of narcotics around the globe. Still, he wants more access to U.S. markets, more money. And in the twins, he sees kindred spirits.
He was an innovator himself, and he recognized in the twins that they were smart, that they were really in expanding, just like Chapo. So they had that in common.
It was effectively a no-brainer business decision to bring them directly in the fold. They basically were granted access into the innermost circle of the cartel. They received the most favorable pricing structure that the cartel was willing to offer. And so from that point on, they became the largest distribution points in the United States for the Sinaloa cartel.
With his new Chicago connection, El Chapo taps the assets that originally put the city on the map, an ideal location and a ready workforce.
Chicago was really Chapo's hub. It's in the middle of the country, the rails, the interstates. I mean, that's why many Fortune 500 companies are located in Chicago. Outside of Mexico, Chicago probably ranks third or fourth of the largest Mexican national population. So there's tens of thousands of hardworking Mexicans in Chicago, and Chapo could hide his organization amongst them. So his organization was well entrenched, and there's 100,000 documented street gang members in the Chicago area who largely make their living putting dope on the street. And Chapo used them, if you will, as their subcontractors.
The tentacles of the Sinaloa cartel had made it directly into the heart of the United States.
Working with Chapo's supply and their own wholesale customers, the twins are eventually moving about 2 tons and $145 million worth of cocaine a month. With about half of it staying in the Chicago area and the rest pushed on to other parts of the country, throughout the Midwest to Philadelphia, D.C., New York, and as far north as Canada.
They opened wholesale markets in places as far as Vancouver for the Sinaloa cartel, and it turned into this massive empire. So for Chapo, it was a gold mine.
In 2003, Chicago twins Peter and Jay Flores are smuggling an unprecedented amount of narcotics from Mexico into the Midwest.
They flooded the city of Chicago with drugs, with tons and tons of cocaine. They were that tunnel from the Sinaloa cartel to the streets of Chicago and the U.S.
The brothers are so good at distribution that the big boss, El Chapo, decides to tap them for an even more lucrative venture. In 2004, he summons the twins to a meeting in Sinaloa. there's a new product on the cartel's lineup, and the twins are going to distribute it.
Opioids were becoming more and more in demand in the United States, and the cartel was smart enough to realize that the profit margins on heroin were dramatically higher than their profit margins on cocaine.
In the summer of 2015, legendary hip-hop group the Wu-Tang Clan is in the midst of the controversial private sale of its album Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. This won't be an album for the people, but for the elite. More specifically, one singular member of the elite. But even given that fact, there's one thing the Wu-Tang Clan couldn't have anticipated. The buyer is going to be the most hated man in America. In the early 2000s, Caroline Stewart is a Wall Street stock analyst who publishes recommendations for biotech stocks. And one morning, after advising against a stock Shkreli is high on, she says he ambushes her with an unsolicited and insulting phone call.
There are times when you get nasty phone calls from people who hold the opposite viewpoint as you on any particular stock. But he's the only instance I could think of where it was actually meant to ridicule. And it quickly devolved into sort of a mockery of me, where he started to ask questions that were obviously meant to just make me feel stupid.
But years later, they meet again when Shkreli is running a hedge fund of his own. And this time, things are much more cordial.
He offered to take me on as a consultant. And I was, again, extremely grateful, and I jumped at the chance.
The company is called MSMB Capital, a hedge fund that specializes in biotech and pharmaceutical investing. It's a red-hot industry on Wall Street, and one Stewart knows well. She works for the fund as an analyst, but beyond researching stocks, she doesn't know much about the inner workings of the company.
It was very strange because, as far as I could tell, there was no audited performance record, and I didn't know how much he had in essence, under management. He was very secretive. He was very, very secretive about things.
Well, ostensibly, MSMB Capital was supposed to be a hedge fund, a true hedge fund. It's supposed to have equal amounts of short and long positions, so it minimizes the risk to investors of a substantial loss. That's how he pitches to investors.
Shkreli tells investors that in the bustle of high-powered investment banks in the heart of the world's biggest financial market, he will work harder and smarter than everyone else.
There were maybe 4 of us crammed into this little room, and it was intense. It was by far the most intense work experience I'd ever had.
It seems to be paying off as investors begin to get behind the fund and its leader.
He made connections with people. He would make a connection to one person, that person would introduce him to another person, and he cultivated these relationships among investors, people that ended up being willing to put capital into his new hedge fund.
People on Wall Street are there for a reason. It's because they want to make money, and money is very important to them. And so everybody's kind of attracted by it, and everybody wants to, jump on that coattail.
But one day, that coattail drags them into the mud.
He took a very aggressive short position on a stock called Orexigen, and that stock trade failed spectacularly. It blew up, and it lost all of MSMB's, or effectively all of MSMB Capital's money. So he was broke.
According to Stewart, Shkreli keeps the destruction of the fund to himself, even hiding it from employees. But for days afterwards, Stewart can see Shkreli's roaring fire extinguished.
He seemed very deflated. And, you know, the lights in the office were off. He was slumped in his chair, he had his hoodie up. And I felt bad for him, because this is a normally very hyper person, if you will, and very aggressive, ambitious, who suddenly, you know, was more like a dog with his tail between its legs. And it was sometime a little later that he told me that the fund had blown up, and then he told me that he owed Bank of America Merrill Lynch $10 million.
According to the government, Shkreli never reveals that detail to investors. In fact, he's been keeping a lot from them.
There's no evidence that at any point he was trading in the manner that he was describing to the investors. There's no evidence that he had the amount of assets under management that he claimed to have. There's no evidence that he performed well with their money. There is significant evidence that he quickly burned through their money that they placed with him.
But the government asserts that Shkreli continues to tell investors everything is doing great.
He's Martin, he keeps on going. He turns what's negative news and he puts a really positive spin on it, and he keeps going. Within a few days, he had come up with a survival plan.
He starts this new hedge fund, MSNB Healthcare, and he follows the same pattern that he did with MSNB Capital. He lures investors in with the promises of that the fund's going to be fully hedged, it's going to behave in the proper manner, it has this auditor, it has this law firm that keeps an eye on things. And he has this great track record. And none of that was true.
But MSNB Healthcare is only the beginning. He brags, boasts, and smooth talks his way into getting investors to put money into a much more ambitious venture. A new drug company of his own creation, Retrophin.
Instead of like the classic scenario of a guy in his laboratory slaving away for years to create the drug that's going to save people, Martin is looking for kind of a market opportunity, a financial market opportunity, in much the same way that he claimed to be looking for market opportunities in buying pharmaceutical stocks. The difference here, instead of buying a stock, an equity, he's buying an actual asset, a drug.
There are virtual biotech companies, and a lot of companies get formed because you have an entrepreneur who is able to scour the universe for maybe drugs that have failed in the past, drugs that were put aside from pharma companies because they weren't going to be profitable enough. You can even go to academia, right, where a lot of the work is done, and say, oh, this looks like a promising compound, I'll in-license it from you, and I'll develop it.
But Shkreli needs money to buy the licenses for these drugs, and he owes investors and banks millions of dollars. He has a big hole to fill, and knows one way to fill it.
So immediately after he formed the company, of course, he's on a mad dash to collect money.
Shkreli never tells investors that MSNB Capital is broke, but he suddenly announces that he is closing the hedge fund, despite its purported success, to focus entirely on Retrophin.
Which surprised just about every investor, because they're like, well, why? Everything's going great. Why would you close this up? He said you can either take the money in cash and get it within a month or so, or you can get the equivalent amount in Retrophin stock. He was hoping, clearly, that people would take the Retrophin stock because that delays having to pay these investors to make them whole. This is akin to a performer who's got a bunch of plates spinning on sticks, and he's keeping the plates spinning.
Most investors ask to take the cash from MSNB Capital, but Shkreli doesn't have the money, and many investors believe he simply ignores them and does whatever he wants.
Martin, as smart as he is completely fiscally irresponsible. Just, as soon as he raises money, I think he almost views it as his.
I think that Martin knew full well that he was misrepresenting what he was doing with people's money. And I think that the history shows here, the evidence shows that instead of doing kind of the grunt work of managing people's money on a daily basis in a way that he claims to be managing it, he's looking for a quick hit, a quick return.
party time in Puerto Vallarta. High season, spring break. But just off the beach, in a luxury villa, the party's over. Mexican police burst through the door. They hold a woman at gunpoint in the bedroom. But it's a man that they're looking for, and he's hiding in the closet.
He was willing to basically sacrifice her for himself in that moment.
Eventually, the police do get their man.
Let's go in the car. We're gonna follow them.
The orgy planned for that evening will have to wait.
Let's go, you guys.
It is the beginning of the bitter end for a man who minutes earlier seems to have the world at his fingertips. Keith Raniere is a world-renowned guru, a sort of life coach with an edge.
I'm very devilish, and I think I'm probably the worst coach in the world because I'm just a demon.
He's the leader of an organization with a strange name and an even stranger spelling, NXIVM, offering self-improvement courses based on a philosophy called rational inquiry, patent pending, that Raniere sells on YouTube.
I'm curious as to why do you call rational inquiry a technology?
You could call it a methodology, too. But a technology, if you look at the definition of the word, I think technology fits.
I was there from the beginning of the program in 1998.
Businesswoman Angela Ucci swears by the training.
Rational inquiry was a systematic approach to looking at your issues in a rational way that would have you shine light on where you developed them yourself and why they might not be rational.
Don't quite understand it? Keith Raniere is here to help. He bills himself as the smartest man in the world with an IQ of 240. Not 1, but 3 degrees from the prestigious Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York. A child judo prodigy and a concert-level pianist who demonstrates his talents. But despite his innumerable skills, he claims to live like a monk, a renunciate. No need for material wealth when one holds the keys to higher consciousness, which Raniere shares in videos like this to spread his teachings.
All the things that happen in life on this earth are really an exercise in oneself with oneself.
I loved the programs. It had emotional components, it had philosophical components, and then it had practical components of goal setting.
But to get the full effect, you have to come here to NXIVM headquarters outside Albany, New York, where new recruits go through a 16-day marathon boot camp of sorts, known as an intensive.
Students started at 7 in the morning and stayed until 9, 10 at night, 16 days in a row.
Only after their indoctrination are they allowed to meet the man himself, the revered leader, Keith Raniere.
He was the most ethical. He was the highest minded. He looked up at the clouds and saw through them.
NXIVM's strange sessions follow what are known as the rules and rituals.
We would clap at the beginning or the end of a class. We would also do the bow to each other, and it was designed after Keith's martial arts background.
Also borrowing from the martial arts, every member wears a colored sash, signifying their rank.
So you had a white sash as a student, and then you went to yellow as a coach, and then orange as a trainer. I do know that some people were vehemently against them. We discussed that people are going to say that we're a cult if we have these things.
Unlike a judo belt that's based on skills, NXIVM sashes are based on money. Even the entry-level white sash doesn't come cheap. The introductory course alone runs as much as $10,000, and no one ever graduates.
You take a $5,000 course, and as soon as you were done with that, you'd be told, now you're really ready to take the next one.
It's easy to rack up a six-figure tab in a year, but trainers can make some of that money back by recruiting new students.
Trainers made, let's call it a commission on the program.
But out of that commission, trainers have to cover expenses like the hotel meeting room. At NXIVM, it appears that the path to higher consciousness takes the shape of a pyramid.
Is it a pyramid scheme? It's possible that yes, it is. It had a, I'm going to say it was definitely pyramidical in nature.
It was structured as a multi-level marketing program that was probably truly a pyramid in the sense that nobody but Raniere and a couple at the top made any kind of a living wage.
To Raniere's most devoted adherents, none of that matters. They follow him to the quiet suburban subdivision where he lives in this unassuming townhome. He owns no car, not even a driver's license. But it's not so bad.
When he lived here, there were 20 or 30 women who had similar townhomes. Did he want something to eat? 5 or 6 women would vie for the privilege. Should he want his feet massaged, he could call upon 20 women, and each would hope for that opportunity to touch his precious feet.
In NXIVM, it takes a village. In this quiet subdivision outside Albany, New York, NXIVM has taken root, a path to higher consciousness in the shape of a pyramid. Founder Keith Raniere lives here with his most ardent followers, most of whom happen to be women.
He had dozens of women who wanted to have nothing more than just a half an hour of his time. He had women fighting to do his laundry.
There are early morning walks and evening volleyball games. And there's gossip. Robert Gavin is a reporter with the Albany Times-Union.
There was a lot of questions about this guy. Who is this guy? And there was a lot more questions than there were answers. But the answers that we did know were not overly flattering.
After graduating from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1982, Raniere learns the basics of multi-level marketing as an Amway distributor. By 1990, he has an idea for a business of his own.
Hello, I'm Eddie Albert.
With a pitch from aging 60s TV star Eddie Albert, Raniere launches Consumers Byline, a buying club where members pay a monthly fee to get discounts on all kinds of products.
His idea is not fancy. It's a simple one, practical, full of common sense.
The real money comes when members recruit new members and collect commissions. Classic multi-level marketing. Tony Natale is an early employee, captivated by Raniere from their first meeting.
When I said to him, so I don't understand, you have a 240 IQ. You could be curing cancer. God gifted you with this brilliant talent. And he said, this is going to be how I'm going to try to change the world. And don't you want to come along? And that was the hook.
So much so that Natale leaves her husband, moves to Albany, and becomes Raniere's girlfriend. At its peak, Consumers Byline boasts 250,000 members. Keith Raniere claims to be a multimillionaire in his 30s.